On a cold February evening in 1981, Forest Hills Central Middle School was not empty. There were parents in the gym, children at a wrestling program, and around 50 people taking part in an aerobics class. A 14-year-old girl stood up, waved, and said she'd be right back. But she may not have simply disappeared on her way to the ladies' room. Witnesses later placed her in the ladies' room, near the hallway, by the southwest doors, and possibly near cars that have never been fully explained. A gray car, a green car, a yellow Nova-style car with its door open, and somewhere in that ordinary school building a narrow window opened. The question is not just where she went, it's how so many people were nearby and still no one saw enough to bring her home. This is the story of Deanie Peters. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. Cascade was not a large city. It was a suburban town just southeast of Grand Rapids, part of the growing Forest Hills area. And in 1981, it was the kind of West Michigan community where a school gym could feel like one of the safest places a child could be. It was suburban, but it still had that small community feel. Families knew the area, children moved between activities, and Forest Hills was a school district built around the idea of community and safety. That's part of what makes Deanie's disappearance so haunting. She was not walking alone down a remote road. She was inside a familiar school building during a community event, in a place where the ordinary was supposed to protect her. Deanie Marie Pyle, also known as Deanie Peters, was a 14-year-old 8th grader at Forest Hills Central Middle School. She was a good student with a few close friends. People remembered her as pretty, outgoing, and someone who dreamed of being a model. She lived with her mother, Mary Peters, and her stepfather, John Peters, an industrial salesman, and 6-year-old half-brother, William, in a comfortable home at 2541 Pebblebrook Drive Southeast. Originally from California, the family had moved to Michigan about 18 months before Deanie disappeared. Her biological father, Dwayne E. Pyle, still lived in California. He and Mary had divorced 9 years earlier when Deanie was just 5. Thursday, February 5, 1981, was a blustery cold day in Cascade with temperatures hovering around 23 degrees. The area had already seen snow for several days, with just over 6 inches falling since the start of the month. A light snow was still falling as the day began. Deanie caught the bus to school as she normally did, and by all accounts it was a normal day for students at Forest Hills. During lunch, Deanie spoke briefly with a classmate, Robert Alexander. He mentioned that she was hoping to meet up with a guy she thought was cute later that evening. Waiting for the bus after school, she chatted with her best friend Kathy Weeks, talking about those things that teenage girls talk about. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Once she arrived home, she made several calls to friends, including one to a family friend, R. Dean Herbert, hoping to get a ride to the library later that afternoon. She made plans to spend Friday night with another classmate, 15-year-old Angela Franklin. Shortly after 4 p.m., Deanie's mother Mary prepared to take William and the Herberts' young son to Forest Hills Central Middle School at 5810 Ada Drive Southeast so the boys could participate in a community education wrestling program. At the last minute, she asked Deanie to accompany her. Deanie, dressed in a brown ski jacket, pink sweater, blue jeans, and a cream-colored scarf, agreed. She got in the car, leaving her purse and wallet at home. At 4:30, Mary, Deanie, William, and R. Dean's son arrived at the school. A few minutes later, David Herbert drove into the school parking lot and noticed an intermediate-sized yellow car with its passenger door open and no one inside. Back inside, Mary and Deanie had stopped to watch an aerobics class taking place in the lower portion of the gym. At about 4:45, Deanie told her mother she needed to use the ladies' room. She waved to Mrs. Herbert as she left, saying she'd be right back. When she didn't return, Mary and the Herberts began looking for her. School authorities and staff also scoured the middle school building for traces of Deanie. By this time, outside the school, light snow was still coming down, softening the parking lot, the cars, and the traces people would later try to remember. When Deanie hadn't been located by 6:42 p.m., they contacted police. Friends said Deanie was unhappy with her stepfather and wanted to return to her biological father in California. Others said she wanted to return to California to see a former boyfriend. Police contacted both, and neither knew of Deanie having any plans to visit. According to Deanie's friends, her stepfather was old-fashioned and protective, and she wanted more freedom. Several times when they argued, Deanie would leave and spend the night at a friend's house. Police initially treated the case as a runaway, although they felt Deanie's disagreements with her stepfather were minor, and they could find no evidence that she ran away. Several witnesses came forward to report that they had seen Deanie after she left the gym, and several more reported strange incidents that may or may not have anything to do with her disappearance. When you look at these sightings sequentially, a really unsettling picture starts to form. First, a student sees Deanie walking west, heading down the hallway toward the science room where her locker was located. Not long after, a mother who was tending to her young son in the ladies' room actually interacted with Deanie. She remembers Deanie standing there brushing her hair. The mother asked her how she was doing, and Deanie gave a quick, normal response. "I'm good." Right outside the ladies' room, her classmate Robert Alexander, the same boy she'd talked to at lunch, spots her. To him, it looked like she was headed toward the exits, although he didn't get the impression that she was necessarily trying to leave the school grounds altogether. From there, investigators believe she cut back west and then south through the building because a parent who was sitting in the cafeteria never saw her pass by. But the sightings got even more complicated. At around 5 p.m., another student reported seeing Deanie walking side by side down the hall near the side door with another young girl, someone the witness thought was a student but simply didn't recognize. And finally, we have a student waiting for a ride by the southwest doors. She saw Deanie walking out, and Deanie actually calls out to her by name, saying, "Hey, I'll see you later," before stepping out into the cold. As that student watched her leave, she noticed a gray car with an unusually long hood idling in the parking lot, its headlights pointed toward the school as light snow continued to fall. The janitor encountered 3 or 4 older boys wearing letter jackets banging on the school's front door near the media center, asking for Dean, the name Deanie typically used with friends. Police did not interview the janitor until decades later, and these boys have never been identified. Mr. Herbert remembers that he saw 4 boys leave the building through the front door, closing the hatchback of a yellow Nova-style car before getting in and driving away. By the time he reached the front door, the car was gone. While this may not have had anything to do with Deanie's disappearance, they may have vital information. A woman parked on the side of the school reported seeing a green car, souped up with a loud exhaust, driving over from the high school. She saw a young girl with long dark hair wearing a coat and scarf come out of the side door and get into the green car, and then the car took off. None of these vehicle sightings proves what happened to Deanie, but taken together, they show how much movement was around the school at the exact time investigators were trying to reconstruct what happened. A week into the investigation, police were beginning to seriously consider the possibility of an abduction because of so few clues. School authorities, bus drivers, hotel, and gas station personnel were also questioned, but none remembered seeing her. There were about 25 people watching the wrestling practice in the upper portion of the gym and 50 people participating in the dance class in the lower portion. Deanie would have had to pass a number of those people as she walked across the gym toward the ladies' room, which was in the north section of the school. Only one, a woman near the back of the dance class, remembered seeing her walk out the gym doors. While there was an aerial search 19 days after Deanie disappeared, there was no real coordinated police search beyond the school grounds, so friends and classmates took it upon themselves to do so. Volunteer searchers combed 6 miles of the Cannonsburg State game area but found nothing. Owners of construction companies were asked to search their construction sites for anything out of the ordinary. There have been several names connected to Deanie's case over the years, but this is one of those investigations where the word suspect can be misleading. Rather than one definite individual, Deanie's case has spent decades being shaped by a fog of community rumors, half-baked stories, and leads that never quite materialized into hard proof. For years, local whispers focused heavily on names like Bruce Bunch, a teenager whose supposed confession about a panic-induced car accident on the winter ice fueled local gossip for generations. There were stories about hidden graves on construction sites and strange, superstitious dreams about birds. Other theories point to school staff like the janitor, or suggested Deanie may have crossed paths with regional predators active in Michigan at the time. And that's the hardest part of this case. After all these years, there are names and there are stories, but there's still no answer. For Deanie's family, life divided between before and after. Her room, her plans, and the ordinary routines of raising a teenage daughter were all frozen in place. And for the students who went to Forest Hills, the school no longer felt quite the same. A place that had once felt familiar now carried a question no one could answer. That kind of uncertainty does not end when the search stops. Deanie was declared legally dead in 1991. Her family moved to a Detroit suburb 2.5 years after she vanished. Her mother and stepfather currently live in Arizona. Even after more than 4 decades, Deanie's case does not have one clear path. It has fragments. If Deanie was seen in the ladies' room brushing her hair, then just outside the ladies' room, and then exiting the southwest door, the question becomes, how far did she actually get on her own? Did she go willingly? Was she meeting someone she expected to see? There are also the cars. Was the gray car with the long hood the same vehicle another witness remembered as green and loud? Was the yellow Nova-style car with the hatchback connected in any way? Or was it just another vehicle in a busy school parking lot on a winter evening? And what about the older boys near the media center door reportedly asking for Dean? Were they looking for Deanie? Or was that another detail in the fog of the investigation that no one knew how important it might become? And then there are the phone calls. A month after Deanie disappeared, Mrs. Herbert received a long-distance call from a girl who cried but said nothing. When Mrs. Herbert asked, "Is this Deanie?" the caller hung up. A boyfriend of Deanie's also received a long-distance collect call from a girl who gave the name of Beth, but because he wasn't home, the call was refused and disconnected. Authorities were concerned enough to urge Deanie's acquaintances to accept collect calls, saying the sheriff's office would pay the charges. Were those just cruel pranks, misunderstandings, or were they something more? And finally, there's the later legal development in 2021. James Frisbee was arrested for perjury connected to the investigation, but he was not accused of causing Deanie's disappearance. In 2026, all charges against him were dropped. After 45 years, the only arrest connected to the case did not answer the central question. So we're left with a girl walking through a school, a door opening, cars in the snow, and a family still wanting to know where Deanie went. When Deanie Peters stood up in that gym, nothing about that moment should have been dangerous. She was 14 years old. She was at her own middle school. Her mother was nearby. Her little brother was there for a wrestling program. Parents were in the building. Children were moving through the school. An aerobics class was underway with dozens of people in the gym. It should have been one of the safest places she could be. And yet, somehow, Deanie slipped out of the protection of the ordinary. That's what brings us back to the beginning. The question is not only how a young girl disappeared, the question is how she disappeared from a place filled with people, movement, lights, voices, and routine, and still left behind so little that could bring her home. For years, rumors have grown around this case. Names have been repeated, searches have been done, suspects have been questioned. One man was even arrested decades later on charges connected to the investigation, only for those charges to eventually be dropped. But Deanie is still missing. And behind every theory is the life of a girl who deserved more than a rumor. She was not just a case from 1981. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a student. A girl making plans for Friday night, talking to friends after school, and imagining a future she never got to live. Someone may still know what happened after Deanie walked away from that gym. Someone may remember a car or the boys by the door. Someone may know whether those phone calls meant anything at all. And if they do, it's long past time for the silence to end. Because Deanie Peters didn't simply vanish into history. She disappeared from a community that was supposed to keep her safe, and that community still owes her the truth. If you have any thoughts or a detail that deserves a closer look, please leave it in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.